The laughter started as a ripple, then roared like a wave crashing through the steel-gray conference room. General Harlan tossed the pilot roster onto the table and sneered at the call sign. Sparrow. He didn't bother hiding the smirk when he looked at Emily Carter, the only woman in the room, the only officer not laughing. 17 men in dress blues leaned back in their chairs, their voices climbing over one another like schoolboys around a prank. Sparrow. Is that supposed to be fierce? Someone mimicked a bird flapping its wings. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't smile or shrink. She just stood at attention, eyes fixed on the mission display behind them, calm as a storm held in place. General Harlan paced, pausing in front of her, voice thick with mock amusement. Maybe we should get you a little cage for your office. The Red Eagles chuckled louder, louder than necessary, and one lieutenant made chirping sounds that echoed off the cold walls. It was a joke to them. She was a joke, until she spoke. I request a full squadron combat simulation. Me versus the Red Eagles. 16 of them. Her voice didn't rise. It landed like stone on glass, snapping the air in two. Silence followed. Not the respectful kind, but the stunned, confused kind that fills a room after someone crosses a line no one expected. Barnes, the squadron leader, blinked. Regulation says maximum 6. You're asking for 16. Her reply came sharp measured. I'm not asking. I'm invoking Readiness Protocol 314.3. Immediate challenge. Open sim. I will take them all. General Harlan's laugh cracked, then faded when she turned her gaze on him and added, I'll beat them in under 7 minutes. Someone coughed. Another officer leaned forward, his grin twitching with doubt. Harlan's face darkened. And if you lose, I'll resign. Publicly. On record. I'll say women don't belong in combat aircraft. And if I win, then you apologize. Not to me. To every woman who ever earned her wings while being told she didn't belong. The room swayed under the weight of her challenge. Every eye was on her now. Not because she was a woman, or because she was quiet, or even because her call sign was Sparrow, but because in that moment, she was something else entirely. Something they hadn't seen coming. Something that didn't need feathers to fly. Emily Carter lived 10 minutes from the base in a one-bedroom house that used to belong to a retired mechanic. The grass out front was never overgrown, but it was never manicured either. Her neighbors called her polite but quiet, the kind of woman who nodded at you in the grocery store and disappeared before you could remember where you knew her from. Every morning she drove an old Ford pickup that wheezed a little when it turned over. It was clean, but worn, the paint faded by too many summers under desert sun. She never parked in the officer's lot, always choosing the farthest corner near the service gate. She wore the same uniform every day, always regulation, always crisp. No pins, no decorations beyond what was required. Her boots were scuffed, not because she didn't care, but because she walked like she had somewhere important to be, even when no one else saw it. She didn't wear makeup, didn't tie her hair in anything fancy. When the wind blew through the base, it always caught a few loose strands that framed her face just enough to soften her silence. People assumed she was forgettable, that she didn't have much to say, and she never corrected them. At the commissary, cashiers called her Miss Carter and knew she liked frozen vegetables and store-brand peanut butter. She paid in cash, carried a canvas bag, and always thanked them like she meant it. Once a teenager asked her if she was a teacher, and she just smiled, that kind of small, faraway smile that leaves you wondering what you missed. Inside her house, the furniture was simple. 1 couch, 1 table, 2 chairs. A single bookshelf held mostly old aviation manuals and a worn-out poetry collection with broken spine. There were no photos on the walls, no trophies, no signs of a life lived in spotlight. Except for one thing. In a fireproof box behind a panel in her closet, she kept a small bundle wrapped in silk. Inside was a photograph of 47 children smiling in front of a brick schoolhouse. Some had missing teeth. One held a flower behind her ear. All of them were gone. Next to the photo was a silver chain with a small metal tag that had no name, only a number. And beneath that, folded neatly, a letter signed by a man who used to be a 4-star general. It wasn't something she looked at often, but sometimes on nights when the desert wind howled against the windows, she'd sit in the dark and hold that photograph like it was a map. She'd lost the courage to follow. No one on base knew about the safe or the box or the letter. They just knew Captain Carter showed up on time, answered questions when asked, and left the same way she came in. Some of them joked she was invisible. Some of them whispered she was odd. But no one, not even once, guessed. She used to fly with a call sign that once shook the sky. She didn't correct them because she didn't need to. Some stories are too heavy to tell twice, and some women are born to carry them in silence until the world is ready to listen. At 21, Emily Carter walked into the Top Gun program with a backpack full of hand-me-down manuals and a chip on her shoulder she never showed. The instructors watched her quietly, expecting the usual, but within weeks their jokes turned to notes and then to silence as they reviewed her scores. She flew like she was born in the cockpit, not trained into it. Her hands moved with intent, not instinct, as if the jet spoke to her in a language no one else understood. While others practiced drills, she broke them apart, reassembled them, and made them faster. Her first simulation run ended in disbelief. 73 seconds to eliminate all targets. Not only clean but precise, no wasted moves. The trainer paused, the tape rewound it, and watched again. By month 2, she was redesigning maneuver protocols in real time during mock combat. She spotted angles others missed and executed them without flinch. Her instructors stopped giving her advice and started taking notes. They called her Phoenix, not just because she rose fast, but because she never stayed down. Once she lost power mid-drill and still landed the bird blind without radar or nav, on nothing but raw nerve and spatial awareness. When asked how she pulled it off, she shrugged and said, "She listened to the wind." She didn't win people over with charm or bravado. She did it with consistency. Every check ride perfect, every assessment clean. When she spoke, she kept it brief, but her eyes said she knew the math better than anyone else in the room. In simulated dogfights, she stacked numbers no one had touched in years. 0 deaths across 73 engagements. Her opponents called it luck. Then they flew against her. Then they called it something else. She had a way of staying just outside the kill box, dragging pilots deeper into their own mistakes. She used their fuel, their frustration, their pride. One after another, they fell behind, locked and tagged done. It wasn't flash that made her great. It was control. Every movement calculated but not cold. She didn't just fly the plane. She made it an extension of herself, like a violinist who never missed a note but still played with heart. The brass took notice, not just her scores but her mind. She rewrote a section of the energy management manual after her 3rd month, quietly, without being asked. They used her notes in the next training cycle without changing a word. When the naming ceremony came, they gave her the patch without fanfare. No speech, just a nod and a hand on her shoulder. Someone whispered that Phoenix wasn't just a call sign. It was a warning. Because in a field of fighters, Emily didn't just belong. She redefined what it meant to earn your wings. And those who saw her fly knew they weren't watching talent. They were witnessing something rarer: mastery. The mission was called Operation Dark Hammer. The briefing was tight, the intel clean, or so they said. 8 jets in formation, her leading with the targeting pod set for a pre-dawn strike on what they claimed was a weapons depot run by insurgents. She scanned the coordinates twice, cross-checked the terrain. Everything lined up with what the analysts had presented. The valley they flew into had ripped helicopters from the sky 30 years ago, but she threaded them through it like a song she already knew by heart. When she got visual, her display lit up in a way that didn't make sense. No heat signatures from weapons, no trucks, just rows of children sitting in a courtyard, the teacher writing on a chalkboard with a stick. It wasn't a compound. It was a school. She called abort. Her voice cracked hard and fast across the radio, but the second jet had already released. 2,000 pounds of guided destruction fell silent through morning air. Without thinking, she dove. Hard. Her jet screamed against gravity as she pushed a maneuver that would black out most pilots. She fired her own missiles at the incoming bomb, praying for a miracle midair. One hit. The explosion lit the sky sideways, throwing debris into the mountain, but the second bomb hit its mark. The schoolyard vanished in dust and flame, replaced by a crater filled with silence. They called it a tragic error, said her instruments had failed, claimed she had misidentified the target in a moment of stress. But in the debriefing room behind closed doors, the truth came out. Captain Briggs had taken money from a defense firm. The land held minerals worth billions. Her old mentor, Colonel Danner, sat on the board. The mission was never about war. It was about profit. They needed someone trusted to lead, someone pure, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. Emily had been perfect, young, gifted, obedient. The hearing was fast, documents falsified, maintenance logs rewritten, witnesses paid to testify that she'd laughed in the mess about hitting civilians. Her protests were buried under protocol and politics. Then came the offer: disappear or be destroyed. A general she barely knew sat across from her and said her name wouldn't survive a full conviction, but if she agreed to vanish, they'd make it go away. Emily didn't ask for time to think. She didn't beg. She just said yes, not because she was guilty, but because 47 children had no one else to carry their names. She gave up Phoenix that day. Let them erase the patch, the record, the medals. In return, she asked for one thing: a photograph. A single image of the kids she couldn't save. She carried that image everywhere, not for guilt, but as a promise, to never let the world forget what happens when greed wears a uniform. After that, she became Sparrow, not to hide, but to remind herself that sometimes the smallest voices need someone to fly for them, even if it means flying alone. Emily Carter arrived at Edwards under orders so quiet no one noticed. She didn't request welcome briefings or ask to meet commanding officers. She signed in, found her quarters, and began her routine like she'd always been there. She took the early shift whenever possible. That meant less chatter in the locker room, fewer questions. It also meant solitude on the tarmac, where the sky felt like a secret only she still believed in. In meetings, she sat in the back. She listened always, rarely spoke unless prompted. When asked for input, her voice was calm, her points exact, but most times others interrupted before she could finish. You could find her in the hangar late at night checking over her aircraft with hands that knew every bolt. She never asked for help, but mechanics started trusting her adjustments more than the inspection sheets. They stopped asking why she worked alone. Sparrow. That was the name on her flight suit. A soft, forgettable call sign. Pilots joked she probably picked it because it matched her size or the fact she barely spoke above a whisper. No one guessed she chose it because sparrows survive what others don't. In training simulations, she never volunteered first. But when pressed, her answers came like blueprints. Efficient, quietly brilliant. Instructors would sometimes pause, blink, then nod, as if discovering something they almost missed. She didn't compete, didn't push. Let the louder voices lead. Let the brash pilots chase glory. But in every tactical breakdown, her notes showed insights no one else caught. Not once did she take credit. Some called her cold. Others said she lacked fire, that killer instinct required for combat. Behind closed doors, they joked she was just a placeholder, a diversity hire. They said she was what recruitment posters looked like, not real warfighters. She never corrected them, never told them she had written half the tactics they now misquoted, that her maneuvers had once been studied by NATO trainers, that she had bled for her silence. Sometimes on Sundays, she sat by herself at the base library, one book in her lap, one hand holding a pencil she never used. She wasn't reading, just breathing, letting the world pass without requiring her to explain who she used to be. Young lieutenants called her ma'am with forced politeness, but never invited her to after-hours gatherings. Some thought she was just too serious. Others believed she was hiding something. They were right, but not in the way they imagined. She memorized every face in the simulator room. She knew which pilots pulled too hard on turns, which ones panicked under pressure. Not to judge, just to know who she'd have to save if something ever went wrong. A few of the mechanics once caught her adjusting a new trainee's control mapping during pre-flight. When asked why, she just shrugged. He looked uncomfortable with the stick. That's all she said. Her uniform stayed pressed, her boots polished, her quarters quiet and clean. On her nightstand was always the same thing: a silver chain with a number no one could trace, and a photograph tucked into her flight bag that never left her side. Every day she woke up and walked past the same men who dismissed her. Every day she stood under the same sky she once commanded. She let them underestimate her, let them speak loudly while knowing she could fly circles around all of them. She didn't live for recognition. She lived for memory, for names never spoken in rooms like this, for the weight of 47 children that no one else remembered but her. And that was enough. Until the day they pushed too far, until the moment the sky called her back, and the quiet woman in the corner stopped pretending she'd forgotten how to fly. The room smelled like coffee and sweat, thick with the stale confidence of men who believed they were the sharpest minds in the sky. General Harlan stood at the front flipping pages of the readiness report, then stopped and stared. He said the name Sparrow like it was a joke he didn't need to explain. A low chuckle rippled through the officers. One leaned back, grinning, said maybe she should stick to filing reports. Another flapped his arms and chirped like a bird. The rest laughed, not even trying to hide it. She stood at the end of the table, hands behind her back, eyes steady on the whiteboard. Not once did she blink. Not once did she flinch. One pilot called her a cheerleader with wings, said the only thing she probably shot down was a grocery list. The jokes kept coming. About casseroles. About base housing. About how women like her always cried under pressure. They spoke over one another like it was a sport, competing to see who could get the biggest laugh at her expense. General Harlan stepped closer, used his height like a weapon. He said women didn't have what it took. No aggression, no instinct, no place in a cockpit when the fight turned real. Colonel Barnes nodded, added that testosterone made warriors, not soft hearts. The room murmured agreement. No one questioned it. No one paused. Emily counted her breaths. One in, one out. The rage rising inside her didn't shake her voice when she finally spoke. I requested this meeting to present a new training protocol. The laughter spiked. Someone clapped mockingly. Another asked if she needed help reading the slides. Barnes leaned forward and told her to consider a transfer to administration, or maybe the mess hall. She let them finish. Let the echo of their contempt fill the corners of the room. Then she looked at them one by one and said the words that cracked the air in two. I challenge the Red Eagles, full squadron simulation. Me versus all 16. It didn't register at first. The silence that followed was confused, awkward, like they'd misheard her. General Harlan blinked, then snorted. You're serious? That's suicide. She nodded. Regulation allows it. I know the rules. Barnes leaned back, his smirk gone. Another pilot muttered something under his breath, but no one laughed now. She stared at them with the calm of someone who'd already buried the worst day of her life. 7 minutes, that's all I need. And just like that, the room that had been full of noise fell dead quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. Because in her voice they heard something they didn't understand. And that scared them more than any simulator ever could. The locker room was empty, just as she hoped it would be. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting a quiet glow over the rows of metal doors. Emily sat alone on the bench, her flight suit hanging in front of her like a shadow waiting to be stepped into. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, laminated photo. 47 faces smiled up at her. Children with bright eyes, crooked grins, and dreams that would never grow old. Her fingers traced the edges of the picture, stopping at each face as if saying their names in silence. She didn't cry. Not yet. But the weight of it filled the space around her, thicker than any armor she could wear. Her phone buzzed once, a number she didn't recognize. The message was short. Don't do this. They're watching. Crawford still has power. She read it twice, then turned the phone face down on the bench. Her hands didn't shake, but her breath caught in her chest. This wasn't just about pride. This was about memory. About ghosts no one else saw. She looked at the suit. Olive green. Functional. Unmarked. Just like she had been for 15 years. But each zipper, each strap was a ritual. A promise pulled tight around old wounds. She stood and stepped into the legs, pulling them up slow. The suit hugged her like it remembered her better than the world did. She zipped it to her collar, then reached into the pocket sewn just beneath her heart. She placed the photo there where no one could see it, but she could feel it. Just enough weight to keep her centered. Her boots hit the floor with finality. Not loud, just certain. Like she wasn't going in to win. She was going in to make them remember. At the door she paused, closed her eyes, took a single breath. When she opened them, the quiet woman was gone. Only Sparrow remained, calm, still, ready. Hangar 3 had never been this full. Every inch of the catwalks, the viewing deck, even the rafters held someone craning for a glimpse. Pilots, techs, officers, civilians, they weren't here for training. They were here for a reckoning. 16 cockpits glowed to life, each man strapping in with practiced ease. They adjusted helmets, cracked knuckles, rolled shoulders. This was supposed to be fun, a public teardown of the base's quietest officer. Emily sat in the center simulator, her hands still, her eyes focused. The room hummed with anticipation, but she didn't hear it. Her breath was even, her grip loose. Every move she needed to make was already mapped in her head. Barnes called out the rules like a man enjoying the show before it even started. 1 hit and you're out. Survive 7 minutes or down all opponents. Everyone knew what would happen. They were just here to see how fast it went. The match began with a click. 16 icons lit up red. 1 green dot held steady in the middle. For the first 20 seconds, she barely moved. The eagles circled her like wolves grinning into their headsets. One even asked if she was having second thoughts. Then she climbed. A vertical split S that ignored every safe G limit, a move designed to create space where there was none. One pilot locked on too late. Her missile curved hard and clean. First eagle down. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The display showed 1 less red icon. No one laughed now. Not even Johnson, who'd made the casserole joke earlier. She rolled left, bled altitude, then cut hard across the lower edge of the formation. A fake-out. 2 more eagles followed and slammed into decoys. Second and third kills confirmed. The pattern shifted. The eagles regrouped, called for delta formation. Classic trap. Boxer in. Cut the exits. Barnes shouted positions, his voice rising. Emily dove straight into the center. Gasps echoed across the hangar. No one dives into a trap. But she did, at full throttle, then snapped into a high G corkscrew that split their perimeter wide open. 1, 2, 3 more red dots blinked out. Eagle 6 tried to flank her. She inverted, dragged speed, let him pass, then clipped him from behind like it was nothing. The crowd surged forward. Phones came out, eyes wide. No one spoke. 5 minutes left. 7 eagles remained. She flew like the simulator was too slow for her, like she had already lived this fight before. Her jet twisted through locks, evaded fire, spun low under radar arcs, then popped up to snipe at impossible angles. 2 more down, then another. Then one crashed, trying to escape her angle. Barnes was sweating now, yelling into comms. Stick together, watch the edges, don't let her isolate. But it didn't matter, she had already done the math. She baited the last 3 into a canyon run. Narrow, risky, designed for 1 pilot. They followed because they thought she was desperate. They were wrong. She looped under a ridge, forced a hesitation, then hit them in reverse order. 3 kills in under 10 seconds. Final red dot gone. Timer read 5:47. The hangar stood silent, like it forgot how to breathe. Emily opened the canopy and climbed out. Her face was calm. No celebration. No grin. Just a quiet nod to the tech crew who stared at her like they were seeing something impossible. General Harlan looked stunned. Barnes slumped. Johnson sat with his head in his hands. Every screen flashed final across the display. She stood there as the echoes faded. Then a voice broke through. An older man, steady in his dress blues, stepped forward. General Morrison. People turned. Some recognized him. Most didn't. But Emily did. He called her name, not Sparrow, Phoenix. The hangar exhaled all at once. Voices rose, half shouting, half whispering. No one moved. Morrison stepped onto the platform, looked straight at her, and said he was sorry. Sorry for letting them bury her. Sorry for staying silent. Sorry for not fighting harder when it mattered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any speech. Then she turned, faced the crowd, and looked at every young pilot watching with tear-streaked cheeks and wide eyes, the ones who had never seen someone like her win on her terms. She raised one hand, not in salute, but in stillness. You underestimated the wrong woman. That message hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Emily Carter was no longer hiding, and the sky would never be the same again. Emily didn't stay for the afterglow. She stepped down from the platform, walked past officers still frozen in their seats. Some tried to speak. No words came. Others saluted without knowing why, their instincts rising faster than their pride. She didn't stop for applause or demands for interviews. She didn't glance back at the simulator room where she rewrote everything they thought they knew. She picked up her old duffel from beside the door, slung it over her shoulder, and kept walking. General Harlan called out to her, voice cracked and thin, saying they needed her, that the Air Force needed pilots like her. She didn't turn. He was too late. The time for recognition had come and gone. Outside, the sun was low, spilling gold across the flight line. Her truck sat where she left it, faded blue, dented at the bumper, steady like it always had been. She climbed in, rested both hands on the wheel, and exhaled. In her pocket, the photo rested against her chest. 47 children smiling in a frame too small for their dreams. She touched it once, just enough to remind herself why she came, and why she couldn't stay. She didn't want command, didn't want medals or promotions or names on buildings. She wanted space, a quiet room, a handful of students who might learn to fly not for glory, but for grace. As she drove through the gates, a sound followed her. It began as a shuffle of boots, then a rustle, then a wave, salutes, one by one, mechanics, officers, cadets. Every single one stood straight and lifted their hand. Not because she demanded it, because she earned it. She didn't see Morrison step back from the crowd, his eyes wet but proud. She didn't hear the whispered question someone asked him. Why didn't she stay? He answered without raising his voice, because she didn't come back to take anything. She came to give something back. Emily drove west toward the edge of the base where the hills started to roll and the sky stretched wide. She didn't speed. She didn't look in the mirror. But if she had, she might have seen a long line of people watching her disappear into sunlight. Some heroes carry flags. Some wear stars. But the ones who last, the ones who leave marks deeper than memory, are the quiet ones. The ones who fly for others when no one is watching. The ones who choose to teach. The ones who carry the names no one else remembers. The ones who rise, fall, and rise again. Not for themselves, but for everyone who never had the chance. And somewhere far above the desert, a murmur of sparrows moved together in the fading light. Small, ordinary, unbreakable.